What's the most powerful engine to ever hit the streets and dominate the racetrack? Is it the one that redefined muscle cars and made history in NASCAR? Or maybe it's the one that still sends chills down the spines of car enthusiasts today? That's right. We're talking about the legendary 426 HEMI, the engine that changed everything. But before we get to how it shook the automotive world, let's rewind. Picture the early 1960s. American car culture was exploding. Muscle cars were more than just vehicles. They were statements of raw power. The competition was fierce, with car manufacturers constantly trying to one-up each other. Everyone was gunning for that crown, the most powerful, fastest engine on the streets. But Chrysler had something different in mind. They weren't looking for just another engine. They wanted an absolute game-changer. The birth of a legend. It all started with a challenge. Chrysler had long been competing in NASCAR, but they were hitting a wall. Their engines just couldn't keep up with the competition. They needed something different, something revolutionary. The engineers at Chrysler knew they had to think bigger, better, and more powerful. In 1963, they began working on a secret project. The goal? To create an engine that would dominate both the racetrack and the streets. But they didn't just tweak their existing designs. Instead, they went back to the drawing board and built something entirely new. A design inspired by their previous efforts in aviation. Enter the hemispherical combustion chamber. Why a hemispherical chamber? It allowed for more efficient combustion, better airflow, and larger valves, all of which translated to more power. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was a total game changer. And in 1964, Chrysler unleashed the beast, the 426 HEMI. But here's the real kicker. It wasn't even built for regular cars at first. Chrysler built it for one reason, to win races, and win it did. Take a moment and imagine this. 1964 Daytona 500. The 426 HEMI roars onto the scene. By the end of the race, it's clear that Chrysler had created something special. They didn't just win the race, they dominated, taking the top 3 spots and leaving their competitors in the dust. NASCAR had never seen anything like it. How the 426 HEMI conquered the streets. After that incredible success at Daytona, the HEMI's reputation spread like wildfire. But there was one problem. NASCAR's rules changed. Chrysler's new powerhouse was simply too dominant, so NASCAR restricted its use. But that didn't stop the HEMI. Far from it. Chrysler knew they had something special, and they weren't about to let it go to waste. The next step, bring the 426 HEMI to the streets. Muscle cars were gaining popularity across America, and Chrysler decided to give everyday drivers the chance to experience the kind of power that had been tearing up the racetrack. In 1966, the 426 HEMI became available in cars like the Plymouth Barracuda and Dodge Charger. Imagine it. You're cruising down the road, and under the hood is the same engine that had destroyed the competition at Daytona. Suddenly, muscle cars weren't just fast, they were ferocious. And if you had a HEMI under the hood, you had the ultimate bragging rights. It wasn't long before the streets were filled with the roar of the HEMI, and drag racers began to notice. The engine's insane torque and acceleration made it a natural fit for the drag strip, where it quickly became the engine to beat. But why was the 426 HEMI so special? Let's break down its design. The power behind the legend. Breaking down the design. To understand why the 426 HEMI was such a monster, we need to take a look under the hood. What made it different? Let's start with that hemispherical combustion chamber. Now, this was an engineering marvel. By using a hemispherical design, Chrysler's engineers were able to fit larger valves into the engine. Bigger valves meant better airflow, and better airflow meant more efficient combustion. More air and fuel mixing? That equals more power. Simple, right? But that wasn't the only trick up the HEMI's sleeve. The engine also had a short stroke and a wide bore. What does that mean? Essentially, the pistons moved a shorter distance, allowing for quicker, more powerful combustion. On top of that, the 426 HEMI had dual rocker arms, one for the intake and one for the exhaust. This allowed the engine to operate more smoothly at high RPMs, which was critical for both racing and street performance. But perhaps the most famous feature of the HEMI was its sheer size. With 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque, this engine could push muscle cars like the Dodge Charger and Plymouth Roadrunner to speeds that left their competitors in the rearview mirror. The result? An engine that didn't just make cars fast, it made them untouchable. The 426 HEMI on the racetrack and beyond. It wasn't just street racers who loved the 426 HEMI. Professional racers couldn't get enough of it either. From NASCAR to the drag strip, this engine was a force to be reckoned with. In the late 1960s, drivers using HEMI-powered cars were taking home trophies left and right. The engine was practically unstoppable. But the HEMI wasn't just about performance. It became a cultural icon. It wasn't long before the word HEMI was synonymous with power. Owning a car with a HEMI under the hood was like carrying a badge of honor. Movies, TV shows, and even songs paid tribute to the HEMI's raw power. It wasn't just an engine. It was a symbol of a time when American muscle cars ruled the roads and racetracks. And if you had a HEMI, you were part of that legacy. The end of an era. 426 HEMI production stops. Finally, we transition to the end of production and why the engine still holds such a strong place in automotive history. All good things must come to an end, and in 1971, Chrysler stopped producing the 426 HEMI. So, what happened? Well, the 1970s brought new challenges: rising insurance rates, stricter emissions regulations, and changes in consumer demand. Big, powerful engines were no longer practical, and the era of the muscle car was fading. But even though the 426 HEMI's production ended, its legacy lived on. Car enthusiasts, collectors, and racers still sought out HEMI-powered cars, and they became valuable pieces of automotive history. Owning one wasn't just about driving fast, it was about owning a piece of the golden age of American muscle. And the legacy lives on. We wrap up with a look at how the HEMI continues to influence modern cars and car culture. Even today, the HEMI name is still alive. Modern HEMI engines are used in vehicles like the Dodge Charger, Challenger, and Ram trucks. While these engines may be more refined and efficient than the original 426, they still carry that same spirit of raw power that made the original so legendary. For car enthusiasts, the 426 HEMI is more than just an engine. It's a symbol of a time when performance mattered more than anything. It represents a golden era of American engineering and power that will never be forgotten. So whether you're watching a vintage muscle car tear down the drag strip or just hearing the iconic roar of a HEMI engine, you're witnessing a legacy that refuses to fade. The 426 HEMI will always be the king of muscle car engines. And that's the story of the 426 HEMI, the engine that didn't just make waves, it created a lasting legacy. Whether you're a car enthusiast, a racer, or just someone who loves hearing the roar of a powerful engine, the HEMI holds a special place in automotive history. But the story doesn't end here. There are countless other engines, cars, and moments in muscle car history that have shaped the culture we know today. So, what other iconic machines or moments do you think deserve the spotlight? Let me know what you'd like to see next, because the road is far from over, and there's always more horsepower to uncover.